Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. We're also on our Facebook page, so you could log on and participate in the discussion taking place there. And of course, later at 9:30, you can call the broadcast to have your say as well. Once again, OECS Day was observed on June the 18th, and we are marking the 37th anniversary of the OECS. That's 37 years since its establishment. And my guests on the program, Ambassador Anthony Severa, Head of International Relations, and Chamberlain Emmanuel, Head of Environmental and Sustainable Cluster at the OECS. We are grappling with the Sargassum seaweed. Likewise, Barbados is also grappling with that same problem as well. What is being done by your unit, if anything at all?
Yeah, well, we have been able to facilitate several dialogues, conversations, between technical persons across the region to try to understand, what's happening with this phenomenon, as well as at the commercial private sector level, also being able to engage and facilitate, entrepreneurs, to see how we can sort of leverage what seems to be negative, into an opportunity. There is, for example, a young entrepreneur from St. Lucia, Joanna Dujan, Algas Limited, who's actually been able to harness that resource, which we see as a nuisance, to produce a product for agriculture, like a liquid fertilizer, and it has been, tested to demonstrate that it works, and try to give an exposure and opportunity, to be able to interact at the regional level, so that that can be broadened. So there is additional.
It appears that the quantity of sargassum is just too much for him.
Well, which is why as we pull together regionally, then you're able to pull together capacity, resources and other technology, to be able to to make it something bigger, because obviously it is really impacting.
Because my information is overwhelming fisherfolk over on the island's east coast, Dennery and so on. Why aren't we able to deal with that issue? Because the information I have is that I think in Grenada they're spending a lot of money clearing it. At least I heard, and I think it was an exaggeration, I don't know, $400,000 a day to deal with it. Might have been an error, but I heard some on the media.
That's a lot of money.
But I
on
mean,
a daily basis.
But the thing is, I guess, if it inundates a particular beach or coast where tourism is important, I mean, you cannot just allow it to remain. So the question is, how do we use it, in a way that that can bring additional benefit? There's also some interest even from Martinique. Okay, so we are engaging and hopefully to be able to come up with some.
But considering it's an existential threat, what is taking so long for us to deal with it? For us to try and contain it.
Right.
Can we contain it at all?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of contain, because it comes basically from an external source. So it's a matter of how do we have systems to cope with it, and also to deal with the removal and the use. So that is where additional cooperation is needed, and some additional injection, both from the private sector, from research, and from investors, and from policymakers, to be able to find a holistic solution to it.
But has there been a coordinated approach as far as addressing that issue?
There have been some attempts both at the national and regional level, but I think based on observation, there is additional work that is needed. I know in communities and national level, ministries and corporate agencies have taken some steps, and even from the tourism sector. But I don't think we have arrived at the ideal solution yet.
I know that's not go ahead, Mr. Ambassador.
And I think more and more countries are beginning to speak together, because it's recognized as a problem that knows no borders. And that is the thing about the common threats that we speak about. They really know no borders. And while nationally people have been trying to deal with the problem, they've come to realize that they cannot deal with it nationally, and they have to begin to speak to each other to try and determine the best ways of dealing with it. It is taking a while. Okay, we might decide, for example, with Dujon, that okay, let's use it to derive some benefit rather than just removing it and pushing it on the
But
side.
Mr. Ambassador, don't you think that there might be agencies beyond the shores of the sub-region who can assist us? What about the University of the West Indies? And as another institution, people
No,
would call into question
yeah.
its relevance.
Yes,
But to me, the
yes.
University of the West Indies should be able
Yes.
to help us cope and deal with that particular issue.
And I believe the university is in fact undertaking research and trying to see how best to deal with the problem. But as I said, more and more institutions and countries are beginning to put their minds and their heads together to try and come to grips with it. It is a problem that we realize is not going to go away in a hurry, but
But let me ask you again, have we sought assistance from outside agencies as far as this issue is concerned? Are you aware?
Yeah, there are agencies that are, again, examining and looking at the situation, and I think there in the coming months there will be a more concerted effort, even as we prepare for our upcoming Council of Ministers of Environment in Montserrat in July. This is one of the areas that ministers have indicated we need to have joint conversation on, so that we can find that solution. And again, that's where even the construct of the OECS has value, that we're able to, under the governance structure, bring particular ministers together in the particular portfolios and collectively grapple with things both at a policy and technical level, and share best practices and find solutions. So hopefully coming out of that we'll have a clearer indication of how we can collectively tackle the issue.
Water as a resource, how are we doing in terms of its management in the sub-region, Mr. Emmanuel?
Well, water, in certain parts is the
Antigua going through its problems as usual?
Well, because of it's a natural environment, but it's and that's why we've been promoting, for example, even in the context of climate change, certain management constructs. For example, the whole issue of rainwater harvesting, that we tend to take for granted. What the folks in the BVI would have indicated is that, and Anguilla, is that because they already have, it's sort of mandatory to have your cisterns, etc. Given that what the hurricane did, that allows them to survive. Okay, if that had not been in place, then you'd have more lives lost and diseases, etc. So those considerations are critical, even to building resilience, because issues.
Is it need, therefore, like the BVI, to make it mandatory in the sub-region, St. Lucia included?
Well, I mean, these are things that we have recommended as considerations. Obviously, in different countries, you have different pressures. So, for example, whereas we have more rivers and natural sources, they depend 100% on desalination, for example, in the BVI. Now, when the hurricane
but from time to time we have severe droughts in St. Lucia.
True. So that is why we have to build systems for greater resilience. Manage our watersheds. The watersheds are critical, to be able to sustain the rivers. So that is why we speak about, not indiscriminately cutting down trees and managing our forests and watersheds. That has real implications when we promote rainwater harvesting systems, when we promote water conservation, etc. These things have a real impact on our resilience, and so we continue to do that and to assist our member states in that area.
Mr. Ambassador, we talk a lot about harmonization as far as OECS is concerned, but there's some issues where we are falling short. Take, for example, the lack of some joint foreign policy. Some islands would be favoring Taiwan compared to other islands favoring mainland China. Don't you think that's something that we should have addressed a long time ago?
Well, you see, the thing about foreign policy is that we are committed, the governments have committed under the treaty to try to achieve as much as possible a harmonized foreign policy. As far as possible, and it says something to you that there is a recognition of the sovereignty of the member states in this respect. And so member states are really free to pursue their foreign policy as they see fit. They will try as much as possible to harmonize that, but they recognize that there comes a point where you may not be able to achieve full harmonization. And this is just one area. The area of China-Taiwan is perhaps one of the few areas where we have not been able to do this. Generally, I will tell you that OECS member states are able to harmonize very well on foreign policy stances. But as I said, there are one or two areas where, we agree to disagree.
But don't you think that this is a major sticking point where you have two major countries that are playing one against the other, playing one set of countries against the other as far as this issue is concerned?
I don't think so. I think those countries who have relations with Taiwan will tell you that they're very comfortable. Those countries who have relations with Beijing will tell you they're very comfortable. And each group derives the maximum benefit that they think they can derive. I mean,
but
it is not...
And some countries losing out, do you think? Let's take St. Lucia, for example. We have diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Don't you think that would inhibit or prevent mainland China from engaging us?
Well, yes. I mean, it's a policy of Beijing that they will not do business with you because you've recognized what they consider a breakaway province. I mean, that is a fact. There are also those persons who will say to you that the fact that 3 countries have relations with Taiwan and 3 have relations with Beijing is good.
At the individual level, but as a collective?
As a collective, of course, because there is clearly a division, if one can call it that, in foreign policy stances. And we should try, as I said, as much as possible to achieve harmonization. But I think, whereas this is the ideal we would want to work toward, in the real world, you have to recognize that there are points where you cannot move beyond. And this just happens to be one of them. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, we may get there. But it is, as we say, it is what it is. And, the governments will eventually determine, whether all of them will move in a particular direction. We hope they do. But in the meantime,
is there a need when it comes to issues of that nature? I'm not saying necessarily through a referendum, but give the people, the citizenry, an opportunity to have a say on those issues, as opposed to governments deciding for the people? Or do you say that the people have elected the governments and therefore the governments have the right to represent the interests?
Like I said, it depends. It is a matter for individual countries. It is not for us at the Commission to indicate a particular direction, because it's essentially a political question. And, member countries will reserve the right to determine on that. We will advise them to the best of our ability in whatever stance they hold. We will advise them on what we see as pros and cons. But in the final analysis, it's a sovereign decision. As I say, they've committed to seek to harmonize as much as is possible, and that is why the treaty is couched in that way, because it recognizes that there are issues that you may never be able to achieve commonality on. In the meantime, you move to other areas where you can work
because
together.
The governments are hell-bent on not giving up sovereignty.
Well, that is perhaps an issue. Perhaps, yes.
What about at the level of representation overseas? You normally have the various territories have their own ambassadors to represent the interest in some countries and so on. Don't you think that would be one way of ensuring that we maximize our financial resources?
Of course.
When we continue to say that we have limited resources at our disposal, we have our own ambassadors for each territories and so on.
Yes. You are right, and it is something that the countries grapple with regularly. There are areas where we have been able to achieve joint representation. We do have joint representation in Brussels and Geneva at the technical level. We did have at the political level in Ottawa, but that office had to be closed for economic reasons. But yes, it is something which we, as a commission, we encourage every time. Again, member states have for various reasons, they determine it is better to have a national representative rather than to be part of a regional framework. But as a matter of fact, this is something that we keep discussing even this last meeting, and certain decisions have been taken in terms of where next we go, for example, in terms of our relationship with Africa, how we move. We're going to have what we consider to be an Africa strategy where we're going to be establishing relations with a number of countries on the African mainland as well as the African Union. So we will be doing
to do that.
This, of course, is intended to happen in a short period of time. Our member states are being urged to take what we call expeditious action within the ambit of whatever resources they have. But whatever they can do to speed up the process, they're encouraged to do so.
Why is there a need to do that right now? To have diplomatic and relations with countries in Africa, improve relations.
Because we believe that we need more and more to expand the scope of our relationship between what we consider to be the traditional partners. They are important, yes, but in this day and age, we believe that more and more we need to look beyond that, and there are opportunities we believe we can garner from those relationships.
You think we're short-sighted? You think it's a case where what works for us, that is what we tend to gravitate to, and therefore we lack the capacity to be creative and we are not risk takers? So one country will be benefiting from the CIP and in follow fashion style, others will just join the bandwagon. That's what is happening.
It's possible. I mean, you know, you work with what works best or what you know works. And there is a
because you're not a risk taker. That's what it is.
Yeah, but that is also a case. I'm saying it's possible that this is the case. You know, there are also questions of resources, whether there are resources that are available to do those kinds of things. For example, to establish an embassy on the African mainland is going to cost quite a lot of money. You're going to have to post staff over there, and so there are all these kinds of questions which you know, governments find themselves having to balance between that and immediate needs at home. So there are all these issues which come into play. I will hasten to say that it's not as easy. These things are rather complex. And as I said,
not to the ordinary man in the street. Huh?
Well, of course, it is not. It is not. And
you're watching Newsmaker Live once again. My guests this evening, Ambassador Anthony Savrin and also Mr. Chamberlain Emmanuel. When we come back, we'll be taking your calls, so please stay with us. You're watching Newsmaker Live. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Newsmaker Live. We'll put a telephone number on screen right now so that you can call with your questions and comments for my guests. Once again, Ambassador Anthony Savrin, Head of the International Relations, that's the Head of International Relations at the OECS Commission, and Mr. Chamberlain Emmanuel, Head of Environmental and Sustainable Cluster, once again also at the OECS Commission. And thank you so much for watching the broadcast as on your television set, as well as on the internet. We're on our Facebook page. So St. Lucia and the sub-region, we observed OECS Day on June the 18th. And over the last 2 days, once again, we had the 65th Authority meeting taking place in St. Lucia, which was also attended by the Prime Minister of Barbados, and that is Mia Mottley. Mr. Ambassador, one of the issues raised by Ms. Mottley with regard to deepening economic relations and also political ties with the sub-region is apparently the failure of the heads and the technocrats and officials and so on to really create that link with the people as far as pointing them in the right direction, the importance of the OECS and so on. One of the quotes attributed to her, and in an article by the Barbados Today newspaper, Much of what we face is common. The challenges that have confronted us are similar. But in spite of the cooperation between our people, we have not yet seen the level of intergovernmental cooperation that matches that which our people have been engaged in at a personal level and at the level of our private sector. More on that in a moment, but we have a call. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Good night, Mrs. Murphy.
Bonsoir, ça va fait?
Moi, je vais te dire, good night pour des guests là.
Good night.
Good night.
Ok, c'est Murphy, moi, aussi, je veux faire un translator, s'il vous plaît. On est deux questions pour moi.
Mais ça, où ça parle ni anglais ni patois?
Mais quand même, moi, je veux réponse là.
Vous voulez
Moi, je veux faire un translator pour moi, pour parler de M. Saban, Sarah Douglas, on va parler de et quand même, deux questions, on va écouter à son TV.
Ok.
Ok, première question, moi, c'est, moi, observe ces pays d'Europe, Taïwan, et bien l'autre pays, Canada, whatever. Quand dans ces pays, inclus nous-mêmes, cette ici, help à de l'argent. Donc, qui gagne, nous gagnons la vie. Mais à présent, qui gagne from nous vis-à-vis de ça, nous va là. C'est la question number one. C'est mon de l'autre avant moi, off. Deuxième là, vous parlez à bon affaires de ces Ouaret là qui a abattu mon à terre. Moi, je parle qu'on voit non ma bon, ils sont déjà bons, ils ont marché à terre. Moi, puis je nous dis bon, je nous va parler bien. Moi, je dis à toi, il dit moi ça va West Africa. Et qu'il dit moi ça là, en Chine, ils sont au courant qui break away et qui amène ça à Caribbean. Bon, en même temps, parler de ça là, ils sont c'est monsieur qui indique à quoi dit, il veut faire manière pour help mon qui a des mais what about qui help you ça nous à nous pêcher? Nous sommes pêcheurs parce qu'on n'y a pas nous pour ça oui. Nous pas ça aider pour nous. So soon un leader pour aider à terre, il va être tractor avec l'eau dans whatever the case may be. Mener à les faire manure by farmer. So qui a dit hot peine pour nous pêcher bis non toi aussi. Bye bye, écoute, c'est quoi ça là à tout qui vient. Merci beaucoup.
Oui, merci pour crier. The last one you understood?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Kasim Syria.
Yes.
And you see, it's coming from West Africa, but what help can be given to fishermen to address that issue?
Yeah, well, like I said, also the view that it may be coming from the South American mainland. So that's why we need to pull together in terms of our research and knowledge and the technical know-how. Certainly, the fishermen, that's a very important livelihood, and we'll be looking to share expertise in that regard as well.
The German's first question, I'll be posing it to you in just a moment, Ambassador. We have a call. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Tim.
Hi.
I would have held on to allow them to answer the gentleman's question, which I think is an important question.
Oh, you said you wanted to hold on?
So that they could answer the gentleman's question, I could do that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I can go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, indeed, islands in the stream, naturally team where they should be heading is to the rivers and then to the oceans. I think that we are still in the stream, not really venturing in terms of international relations. You heard Mr. Severus speak to just thinking about making connections with the African continent. But to move on, because there are several issues, I know I'll not be able to outline all of them tonight, but some of the key ones. Trade within the OECS, from what I heard, is less than 1%. I'm going to leave it at that so that can be discussed. I think this is really vexing, so to speak. Then I want to speak to, if they have the time, to discuss the CIP and its potential impact on the region, because from my understanding, if you're a citizen of one country, you're a citizen of all. How could that potentially impact the OECS going forward? I also would like to speak to, I know Mia Motley, the Prime Minister Barbados mentioned it today, but it has been an issue that has come up for discussion over many years. I know it was a pet peeve, I say that way, for the late Sir Dwight Venner, and that is the ferry travel within the sub-region and perhaps just beyond the sub-region. This has been spoken about year after year. I know the current Prime Minister has spoken to it at some point. I remember reading an article about it happening, so ferry travel. I want to speak to the OECS News Link, which has been disbanded, and which I thought was a good bridge between countries, or bridge that led you from country to country. No longer in operation. I think this is one thing that has to be perhaps revisited. To my mind, it really allowed for us to know what's going on within the OACS. And as I said, there's so many issues, but I'm going to speak to one other one and then give somebody else the opportunity. And to look at the issue of tourism, infrastructural development, and environmental sustainability, considering that we're living now in an era of climate change. How do we strike a balance? Thank you, team, and good night to your guest.
I appreciate the contribution, sir. Mr. Ambassador, which one would you like to address? CIP?
Certainly not. No, but there's the issue of trade. The fact that, intra-OECS trade represents just 1%, it has to do with the structure of our economies. It is not really an issue that is related to the OECS integration per se. It has impact, yes, but it's really a function of the structure of our economies. Our economies are such that we produce essentially primaries in the days of bananas. Now we've moved beyond that, and we produce tourism services. We don't exchange this. We don't have the manufacturing base that would support that kind of exchange, and that is why, to come back to your earlier point, we import a lot of stuff out of Barbados, out of the US, out of the UK, because the structure of our economies is such that we engage in the production of services that are consumed overseas, in North America, in Europe. That's tourism services.
We have a call. Good evening. Thanks for holding on. Newsmaker Live. You're on the air.
Good evening, Tim, and good evening to your panel.
Hi. Good evening to you, sir.
Your last caller, a good carpenter, I must say. Really and truly, when you think of the OECS and what you expect, I think this is a picture that's painted, and he did a good job at painting some of the things you expect from an OECS body, given the understanding to its mandate or operation. But I want to speak to the environmentalists in regard to the Sagasta seaweed, which I understand the South American, how could I put it, theory to its surfacing, to use that word. And some may say also the coming off of the south of Africa and so on, coming across. But one of the major factors for me in that is, one, that information is still stifled. It's not out there so much for persons to really, I think, hear more about it and understand it. But from an OECS body, it's affecting us. You spoke about moving from the ambassador, that is from the banana era into the tourism era. But how does that same Sagasta affect us? And also, some of the countries within the OECS give the okay to fishing of turtle, if you want to call it that. There's a season. Now, how does that also affect the tourism business when you look at ecotourism, and the list goes on, persons who love the marine life and who are actually, in my line of work, which are scuba divers? I find that, in certain areas, the business of the OECS, call it husband and wife between all the islands, it's showing light, but then in other areas it's showing weakness. How are we, Tim, you asked a perfect question in that of why we have so many ambassadors when we could have representatives through the OECS being the ambassadors for all our countries. And I guess the long run to it is we're saving money and we're working together as a unit. So I think Suku's statement was probably based on what seems to be the common, I would put it at the common sense feel to the OECS, and what is expected. But I'm very much concerned as to the Sagasta on our beach, and as from OECS countries, what are we doing to fight this that is going to eventually affect the marine life even more, because it has already started, and again affect our tourism business indirectly if it's not addressed sooner rather than later. And as the fishermen, development and growth within the communities through the fishers, a lot is being lost, and I think the OECS has not made a voice probably, or had a voice on that, and hence again I pose the question to your environmentalist, what is his view on what can we do to move forward in that sense. Thank you, Tim, and have a blessed one.
You too. Thank you so much for calling. What say you, Mr.
Yes,
Emmanuel?
well, very, very valid observation by the caller. As indicated, there have been many national community efforts. We have had some regional conversations, but right now it's clear that that needs to be accelerated and expanded to bring in the actual technical know-how and knowledge and collaboration on certain actions. So that's what we will be seeking to do when we have our next meeting.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you,
Yes,
sir.
it's such a very interesting program, and good night to your guests as well.
Good night.
Good night.
The discussion, the preambles to the question period, there have been so many, Tim, and every caller is right. We need to address all the issues so far, but I want to address one issue, and I want to direct you to the ambassador. I noticed there is the narration about possibly welcoming Barbados, which was tried before, into the OECS family. But I want to ask the question, why is it that our politicians, and especially our economists, would not regard the writings of Sir Arthur Lewis, an economist of chief in the region? I mean, I think we're all aware that Singapore has done this, and they are a little island, or not a little island, they are an island, but they're like a big country economically, and they've embraced and grabbed with both hands the writings and the thesis and everything stated by Sir Arthur. Here we are in the region, we are groveling, actually groveling. So I want to ask the question, why should we suffer and disregard, be caused to suffer by disregarding Sir Arthur's writings? When he wrote a book, The Little Eight, and in that book he was saying categorically that the small islands of the Caribbean must be careful about the lurkings of the more developed, the MDC's islands of the region. For example, we have one West Indian who has led the West Indies cricket team for 2 consecutive victories in the entire universe. And you know the castigation which the people from the MDCs gave to Little Sammy? Nobody has called for any refereeing. This should not be. We need to bring our people together. Sammy is a national of St. Lucia. His people love him. He lectures, or he goes to the schools and talks to the young people. What message are we giving to them? The next thing, Tim, years ago, I was young. I remember listening to Dr. Eric Williams from Trinidad. Things were not going his way, and he asked the question, what happens if you take away 1 from 10? Trinidad wanted to pull up from the Federation. He said 0. In recent times, we notice kids have been paying their monies, parents have been making the sacrifices to send their kids to university. Trinidad, they were not allowed to board. They were told to leave and get their boarding facilities. Discrimination. Look today, Tim. St. Lucians are crying, but they're not talking. People used to have a little penny shop or 2-cent shop. They would get their little business going. We have the Mega Marcy from Trinidad, originally from England. They've taken over everything by way of food supply and food delivery. Marcy stores. They have not only confined themselves to selling consumable items like food, now they're doing almost everything. So they'll be selling motor cars. So they're giving the engineer St. Lucian so much challenge because maybe we don't have the capacity. So what is the benefit of us enlarging and bringing in more of the MDCs among the LDCs? Like Sir Arthur said, we are sardines. Wouldn't the sharks eat us up? Where do we go? I think I would like the ambassador to really give us some light on this, because the younger generation, they're in the majority and they aren't fools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ambassador, I need to pass this on to you.
Yes, I mean, I understand the frustrations that the caller is experiencing, and I think he has given us more reason why the OECS. That's what he has done. He has given us every reason why the OECS, and that is that we need to work closer together to try to seek the kind of unity, the regionalism, the integration that will take us out of the problems that he sees.
Good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller.
Good night to you, Mr. Timothy, and your guests.
Good evening to you, sir.
Yes, good night.
I would like to ask Mr. Emmanuel in particular, have they ever sought any assistance from Matnik in dealing with the sargassum seaweed? Because from what I've seen over there, they seem to have been pretty advanced in terms of cleaning up the sea for the fishermen. I think that is the course that he should follow.
Because I think that Matnik
Please
is getting
go to
assistance from
Matnik and
France.
find out what they're doing there, and we use that as an example, as a possible example. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr.
Yes,
Emmanuel.
well, thanks. Well, we have not gotten, I would say, assistance, actual cleanup, not to my knowledge, but Matnik is very keen to share their experience and their knowledge. We have had even private sector persons reaching out, both to discuss, to collaborate, and also to engage even with the local firm I mentioned earlier. So there is interest that has been expressed, and we will be exploring further how we can leverage what they've been able to accomplish to the other islands of the Union. Yeah.
We continue to take your calls. Good evening. Newsmaker Live. Hello, good evening to you, caller.
Hi, Tim. Good night to you and your guest.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Yes, good night.
Evening.
Tim, did you hear anything new from this OECS meeting that was held here that you have not heard in the last 10, 20 years? Did you hear anything new, Tim?
What's your opinion?
No. Because if Ambassador
Sevre.
can attest to that. He has been around a long time. We are just spinning top in mud. It's like a découché. They come and say the same thing over and over. And I don't know. And I don't know if Ambassador Sevre, as a technocrat, I don't know if he has any big say in what is happening around the leaders and whatnot, or if he is hampered in speaking out or giving advice to them. I don't, because the guys are saying the same thing. Don't forget, some years ago, the former Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Sir James Michel, said that when they meet at CARICOM meeting, all they do is they meet, eat, drink, and agree to meet again. This is a serious thing, Tim. We are going nowhere, Tim. Tim, roll your tapes and tell me if you have heard anything new in the last 10, 20 years. We have had different, how we call them, Secretary Generals. We have had Dr. Vaughan Lewis. We now have Dr. Didicus Jules. We had this other lady before, Dr. what's her name?
Len Ishmael. Len Ishmael.
And it's the same thing, Tim. We are going nowhere, Tim. Nowhere.
Okay, the ambassador will tell us whether we're going somewhere or we're not going anywhere.
He knows that we are going nowhere.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, caller. Mr. Ambassador, what say you to this?
No, I think we're going somewhere slowly, I will admit. And as I said before, these things take time. There are a number of problems which this will be based on. For example, you have countries where governments change. A new government administration comes in, might have a different approach to certain things. So there are a lot of dynamics at play. But it's the kind of process that you need to keep working at. I don't think it's the kind of thing that we can abandon and say nothing is working.
Mr. Emmanuel, I think you feel very comfortable, very safe that you don't have to answer this question, right? Let's take another call. Good evening. This is Newsmaker Live. You're on the air.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Ambassador, Mr. Pauling,
Yes,
I think
good evening.
Mr. Emmanuel as well.
Yes.
yes, the resounding voice tonight is that the OECS is moving too slow. And we need to upgrade. We need OECS 2.0 to start kicking in. When it comes to the healthcare system, I mean, we have been sharing medication, I believe, and buying in bulk, and that is a good thing. But I believe St. Lucia has spoken about a national health insurance, and I believe one of the other Caribbean islands, I think it was Grenada,
who spoke about the same thing. I believe it's time the OECS stand and try to take the lead on this and try and get more of the islands to come together and to try and put in a system whereby everyone can share the cost of medical care. We have a very large facility here in St. Lucia that the government clearly cannot manage on their own, and if the OECS can come together and have this institution as one of its primary institutions for innovative and cutting-edge healthcare, that can impact positively on our region. If we can also reduce the transportation between the islands, we already have the free movement of people and goods and services, I believe, in the OECS Union. If we can get a carrier, which is a boat, because we know the airlines are expensive, but if we can get a boat like we have Express coming down from Guadeloupe and Dominica to St. Lucia, if we could get one moving from St. Vincent to St. Lucia to Grenada and maybe Barbados, that would also help. The OECS can also move forward when it comes to representing internationally. You find each Caribbean island wants to have their own consulate, wants to have their own diplomatic corps, wants to have their own this and their own that, and this is expensive. If we could have the OECS as our voice out there, if we're in St. Lucia, we are tied to Taiwan, and that is just one case. And in St. Vincent, they're tied to China. What we can do is have one OECS diplomatic corps in China, have one in Taiwan, and the islands who are basically aligned with that country, the OECS represent them there. Where it is not represented, where the island is not in connection with that country, the OECS would not represent that island there. When you look at places like the United States, we could have one representative in California, we could have one in Texas, we could have one in Washington and one in New York. Then you get it spread, and we spread our resources. That is where the OECS can come in and help. So the OECS can help in so many ways. I mean, we don't even have a parliament, a designated parliament. This is the parliament for the OECS. Every time you have an OECS meeting or heads of government, they have to meet in some hotel. I mean, this is showing the fact that this organization needs to move, forward. You understand? If we could have this one parliament whereby when the heads meet, they meet in this one building and this represents our parliament, then we can move forward. If we have the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, and the building that it's supposed to house in is closed down or it's in a mess, I mean, all this speaks of the pride and the joy and the oneness that can come out from that organization. We already share the one currency. There's a lot of things and improvements that we can share. We recognize that there are islands who want to join our union, like Martinique, who are associated states, like Guadeloupe here, who wants to join. So that means we are moving in the right direction. It's just the pace that we are moving at, people are getting frustrated with it. So the OECS need to move forward. They need to show in the region that we, as small island states, can move forward into the future and be more united and make it look like, or make it seem, because it has been done in other countries like the European Union and the United States, coming together and having one central system, that more can be accomplished, as opposed to the African Union. They are separate, this, that, and everybody is fighting against each other. So you recognize when countries come together like the European Union, you have a better system. So I'm hoping that this gives a little light, coming from a young person, not one of the old guys out there, a young person who's telling me that this is the way we need to move forward.
Thank you so much, young man. Thank you. Appreciate the contribution. Let's see.
I think the caller has, his views are on target in many respects. But I will say this, it's interesting that outside of the OECS, there is a view that this is a dynamic organization. It's doing things that others have not been able to do. And I go back to my earlier comment about taking the things that we have for granted. And I think perhaps we need to do a bit more to sell our achievements to our people. so that they get to a better understanding of what we have been able to achieve as a regional organization. But yes, the feedback that we get from international organizations, external partner governments, as well as people, ordinary people who live outside of the OECS, their view is that this is a dynamic organization and it is doing things and achieving things that others have not been able to do. This is just...
We have another call. Good evening. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Kim. Good night. How
Hi.
are you doing?
Good night to you, sir. I'm okay. Yourself?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought, Ambassador, listening to you tonight, and I didn't get a chance to follow the meeting itself of the heads. But the fact that Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, attended was, in my view, very significant. It immediately signaled that the OECS as a body is her almost natural first port of call if Barbados is to resuscitate itself. Now, I thought what we would have heard is some significant development by Barbados in terms of attempting to join the currency union. And the reason why I say so is because a weak Barbados is not good for the OECS. We need a strong Barbados. That's the country we do a lot of trading with in terms of goods. So we need a strong Barbados, and a Barbados which is on the brink of facing the IMF is not good. So I thought I would have heard some elements or an outline of a framework where Barbados would be seeking to incorporate its monetary policy under the umbrella of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. In that way, the stress that Barbados is going through now and trying to find reserves to back up its dollar and foreign exchange this would have been lessened. We'd have a stronger Barbados with more predictability, which is an asset for us in terms of our trade. So I am not sure what the head discussed in that regard. I would love to know. I think the people of St. Lucia, the OECS, would love to know, because this is a matter of our own survival in the short, medium, and long term. And if there is one CARICOM country that is perhaps closest aligned to beginning the elements of a single currency within CARICOM, I think Barbados is the one closest aligned to the OECS. So I don't know what if he can give us any feedback in terms of any discussions on that particular area.
Thank you so much for calling, sir.
I mean, much of the discussion between the heads and Prime Minister Mottley were done in closed session. So I do not believe that, from what I've been able to garner, that this would have been an issue that they would have discussed. There was no, as far as I understand it, it was not a question of joining the OECS, but a question of working closely with the OECS as much as is possible, finding areas of common concern and seeing how, we can share best practice, basically working closer together, not joining the OECS. At least this is not my understanding. So I'm not able to say whether issues of monetary policy were addressed at all.
One of the callers did pose two questions to you. I think one was posed to you and the other one. According to him, we normally get aid from Taiwan, Canada, and so on, and we appreciate that. But what's in it for those countries?
Well, I will say this. In the business of international relations, it's always about national interest. It's not necessarily because we love you. And so, people look to leverage whatever assistance they give you for what they can receive by way of support in various international fora, especially in our case. Now, whatever assistance the member states get from other countries is a domestic matter. It's not something that the OECS as an organization gets into. Whatever Taiwan may give to St. Lucia, for example, is a domestic matter, and it's not something that the organization gets involved in. So I'm not able to say, how that money benefits the region. I can't.
We have a final call on line. Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Hi, good evening to you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, think I wanted to express my deepest gratitude to many of the stalwarts who put together the OECS, John, Dane, Eugenia.
I think in the case of St. Lucia, it was Mr. Winston Snack, who signed on behalf of St. Lucia, then Prime Minister Snack.
Okay, indeed. Well, we know that Sir John was one of the men who really went for the deepening the integration. And I know many people are sometimes expressing the views that things are not moving as fast as they would like it to be. But like many of us who've grown up in the modern times, we take for granted what we have. And we must not forget what we have is much more than what we don't have. And many of the people have worked very hard to keep the organization together, and so much work is being done. Maybe one of the things that we must do, even in the school system, have as part of the curriculum the history of the OCS and the benefits that will derive over many years, so the youngsters could know and they themselves play their part in expressing their appreciation and how they themselves could offer their own ideas on making things better for us to develop more. But we know the tremendous benefits that we have derived from the grouping, like was mentioned, the monetary union, the free movement of the people, capital, labor, and all of that. We are so appreciative for, and we must encourage the staff, the different heads, the DG, and we want them to know that we appreciate the hard work that they're doing and continue to work hard and really think of the people, because the people have benefited tremendously from this union. And we hope that it will be around for a very long time.
Call. Let's take the final comments from you, gentlemen. Let's start with you, Mr. Emmanuel.
Well, thank you, Tim, for the opportunity to be here, and I think it was very good to hear from the people. And I think what I've gathered myself is that the people find the OECS very relevant, but they probably want to see a more ambitious agenda, which is, I think, encouraging for us. They want to get more out of it, and they appreciate the benefits thus far. And at a technical level, I think that can help guide our work program. And I suppose at the policy level, hopefully, our leaders would also listen.
Final comments from you, Ambassador?
Well, I want to echo Chamberlain's comments, not to repeat them, and to say that I am heartened by the final caller, that in my view, there is a lot that has happened as a result of the organization. The benefits accruing to the person on the street is tremendous, I believe, to the point where unfortunately a lot of it is taken for granted. There is, and we understand, a feeling that the organization is not moving quickly enough. Again, this is something we will take on board in terms of our own planning. But I'm heartened by some of the comments that I've heard. I believe the organization has made a difference in the lives of people of the region, and I believe it's going to be around for quite a while. We as technicians, as technocrats, we have a role to play, and that is to provide advice to the politicians. The OECS is essentially a political organization, and our role as technicians and technocrats would be to provide the best advice that we can give. Whether that advice is taken, it's another matter, but we have a role, and the role is to provide support and to keep working, and this is what we will continue to do.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being my
Our
guest,
pleasure.
as well as Mr. Emmanuel. And to you, thank you so much for taking time off to watch the broadcast both on your television set as well as on our Facebook page. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked. Once again, as a broadcaster, a very good evening. My name is Timothy Polion. See you next time. Good night.